Good morning. Today is Tuesday, September 27th, 2022. This is a work session for the Board of County Commissioners. It is 11 o'clock, and we have a short-term rental update. Jeanette Musio and Alex Sanchez. You guys, come on up. Welcome. We are excited to hear about what is going on in the world of short-term rentals.
Exciting.
Hi.
Hi.
Nice to see you in person.
Nice. Hello.
Yeah, it's nice to have you guys
Live.
here.
Yeah, nice to be here.
Are we going to be seeing you later today, too?
Yes, of
Perfect.
course.
All right,
Yes.
the floor
How could
is
I miss
yours.
that excitement?
Great. Alex Sanchez, a community development analyst here.
Oh, Jeanette Musio, short-term rental manager for Picken County Unincorporated.
Okay, and you are going to give us lots of good information, right? Perfect.
Yeah.
We are excited.
So a little background for the commissioners first. The regulations went into effect September 20th, but since July, I think 15th, we've been working with members of the public to accept license applications, review them, and get them prepared for this effective date. We'll be giving you an update on general license information, what we've received, how many have been approved, how many are in review, as well as outlining some of the process for what a license application takes, the appeal process, and then rural and remote, because those are ones you will be seeing before you in the coming weeks. And then just some other updates on kind of the outreach that we've done to the public as we've neared this September 20th effective date. So again, just kind of general license numbers. So far, as of yesterday, I pulled these. We've received 99 applications for STR license. Of those, 2 fall into the rural and remote category. And so far, we've issued 32 of those licenses. So the remaining are still kind of in the review process, either in noticing, waiting for fees to be paid, or for additional documents to be provided before we can approve or reject those. Now, the last bullet point there, within the last 5 years, and we'll pull up our monitoring software, Rentalscape, we are currently tracking around 200 properties. Now, if you remember when we first came before the board regarding fees, we anticipated somewhere around 312 properties have some level of STR activities. We've reduced that number since because around 100 properties were in the Inn at Aspen. Now, the Inn at Aspen is exempt from these regulations because they're a hotel. So in our original estimates that was included. Since then, we've updated to remove that and wanted to notify all of you of that change. This really has, I think, a connection with the fee side of things, which here we'll be talking about. So again, the original numbers were based on 312 properties. We've since reduced that by about 100. So that could have a potential impact in revenue. Right now, we've collected a little over 137,000 in revenue, and this is since July to yesterday. We had originally budgeted around 300,000 in revenue. We want to again caution that that might come in under projected or the budgeted revenue because of those 100 properties that came off of the STR market, or the way we look at it. With that, we are not expected to do our budgeted expenses either. There was a code enforcement officer that was budgeted that we haven't since gone out to hire. We're still working through the licensing portion, and then we'll be moving into the enforcement side. There's also a vehicle that hasn't been purchased by the department, so there are cost savings that we feel confident we're not going to come in under budget in year 1, but we are looking very closely into next year's budget, which will come before you in a few weeks as well in the budgeting process.
Question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Just out of interest, what do you think the savings are by eliminating that position in the vehicle? Just so give it ballpark. Just that salary and benefits.
100,000, maybe a little
Plus the
more.
car.
What do you think? Yeah. So
and I think this is a we want to see we had 100 come off as Alex said, which is significant. We still feel, I believe, like there might be some hanging out there that may be enforcement issues that have not been licensed, and so we're going to really look at that demand, so that,
Right, so
yeah.
get a better idea of what to expect. I'm also wondering, is there any way you can track those, like and we've done short-term rentals in the past, but we switched to long-term back in the summer. We're doing, to the music festival and to the ski company program and all that, so we're doing multiple month. Is there a way to track how many people have decided to do that instead of short-term rental?
Good question. Yeah.
Yeah, the second one there, that's a little more complex because what our monitoring software does is they are able to identify those that have operated as an STR even as far back as 2006. What is a little more difficult is when they take that listing offline, we can't tell if they're taking it offline because of personal reasons. They might want to use the house, or they've decided to go to a longer term rental type of business model. So we don't have that information. We are just tracking ones that have some level of activity in the past and whether they're continuing that. But if they come off the market, what they're now being used for, yeah, we just don't have that capability at the moment.
Just wondering if there's a way to survey them. The other thing I wanted to mention, since I'm on here, the other thing I've noticed is I'm seeing advertisements now online for 30-plus day, like traveling nurses or something. Companies are forming that they charge you a $100 a year subscription fee, and then they filter people who will stay for 30 days plus. So it's short-term rental plus, but it still isn't necessarily hiring locals, but it's this funny evolution of the program. I just wanted to alert you all to it.
Yeah, well, we could track that from just the ones that I've spoke, and keep a record of that. That would be good information to have. So
It'd be nice to know the ones who decided they're going to rent to locals too. Just it'd be nice to have those numbers so we can decide.
And I have spoke to a handful of individuals who are doing that.
Right, yeah. I
Just
have too.
deciding the fee was too high or whatever reason, and they just decided not to bother with the program, just to rent
Right.
31 days. And that's going to become the compliance piece to make sure that yes, they are using, renting long-term.
Yeah, they don't have 6 contracts for the same 31 days.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I really support that. I've thought all along in this that from all the public feedback that we got, it's a really good listing of folks who we could engage with, even to have bigger conversations about are there things that we could be doing to incentivize the conversion. Maybe this is incentivizing them, but maybe there's more to do to help, convert to long-term rentals. Would be great. I'd love to know that. And I feel like we heard from so many hundreds of people that they would be ripe to survey on this.
And Gina, do you want to touch on the rolling application basis as well and how that ties into revenue?
Yes, I've spoke to quite a few individuals who don't quite understand the fee structure, that it's on a rolling basis. So that figure up there, I think, is a little low. I think, as it gets closer to peak season, we're going to see more applications come in who maybe they don't have any bookings until Christmas or until December. So they're waiting to submit their application so they have that full year to execute the 120 days. So I think that number is going to continue. They kind of trickle in every day, so I think it'll continue to increase.
And so some other items we just want to bring up on kind of this fee discussion that we've heard. Originally, when we brought the fee proposal, it was the assessed value of the home times a tiered rate based on what they selected on number of nights they're renting. We never envisioned a scenario, or what we've seen in a couple of cases, where they're not renting the entire property. They might be only renting a room within it or an ADU something. And so they're getting the full property assessed value, even though it might be only a fourth of the square footage on there. It's not something that we currently have a proposed solution, but we are looking for more data as we get through year one of this process and understanding of those cases that fall into this, what would be a way that we could potentially approach this. There might be some cases that do come to you as we understand what that process is based on our attorney's feedback, is that they come to you and they would ask for some type of deference, different amount based on what they're going to provide. So just to tee that up, that you will start seeing a few of those with this exact scenario that's kind of played out that we just hadn't created some type of exemption for within the fee structure that was approved.
Kelly.
Yeah, I guess I'm just wondering, when we issue the permit, I think it does this, but please clarify, that it's specific for a number of occupants for that space, right?
It's part of the requirement
Right.
in getting an application. is they
Okay,
have to have-
because I just am thinking about people might take advantage of that and say, oh, I'm only gonna rent one bedroom in my 5-bedroom home. You know, it puts a lot of pressure on the auditing side, but we would have a way to audit if they're renting to 10 people when they only have a permit for 2, right? So I would wanna just think through that more before we make
Yeah,
that change.
that would be hard to enforce, especially if it's
Yeah.
within the home.
Right.
Now, if it's a separate, an ADU, I think that's a little bit easier to value, but yeah, that would be a slippery slope.
Yeah.
Yeah,
for
the
sure.
same would go for, I'm only renting 200 square feet, when I'm actually renting
Right.
1,200 square feet. So, and could people come back mid-year and say, well, now that you kind of thought about this percentage, can I get a refund?
Yeah, I mean, if they could, I guess, in theory, show that they selected tier 2, but really only rented in tier 1, and we can calculate the difference and do a refund because they didn't go up in that. I don't think there's anything prohibiting that, so it's definitely a possibility. I agree that the bedroom count, if there's a way to look at this, is probably a cleaner way to look, because we know per bedroom, that's 2 individuals that can occupy that rental, and we've got some ways to kind of verify that. I think the square footage is something I looked at, but it becomes very messy when we're actually putting it in practice into, right, how do you divide, say, a $2,000 fee based on square footage, based on what they're showing us. So
Yeah.
it becomes a bit of a rabbit hole. But again, this is something that I think as we get better information, we want to bring back to you. It's an item we're aware, right, an equity piece that needs to be looked at a bit further. But until we get some good information to back, some of these proposals, we just don't have anything at the moment.
I think it's great for the public to know that we are taking these new things we're finding into consideration. That we're not saying, no, this is the program we're gonna have, this is the program that works. But that when we created this program, we said it's a living document. We'll be looking at it when new information comes forward. We will most likely be tweaking things in one direction or the other. And I want the public to know that we're actually doing that.
I also think we should actively look for incentives, rather than carrots rather than sticks, just because you can incentivize somebody to do it. We just should have a quiver of incentives as well, hopefully. Wouldn't that be great? So we could keep looking for them.
I've always wondered about that carrot versus stick, because you can still hit people with a carrot.
If it's big enough, yeah.
Okay, so keep going. We like this info.
I think I
Oh,
see
that's
Francie.
Francie? I was waiting for a hand, a little yellow hand.
I have a question about the renting part of a property. So some of the properties are pretty big and they have several family houses on them, and they're renting out maybe a small cabin or maybe part of one of the houses. So it does seem that this first year, it's not reasonable to charge them a percentage of a $20 million property when they're renting out maybe 5% of it. So I hope that we can come up with something about that before too long.
Yeah, so in this first year, because of the fee structure that was approved by the BOCC, we are going to stick with that. For any cases that come up where they're finding an issue or they're thinking a scenario just like that, right, it's a percentage evaluation, those will come back before the BOCC for you guys to make a determination on that in a case-by-case basis. And, we will provide recommendations or potential ways to look at that, but all of those will come before you until there's, right, a wholesale change to the structure itself that's approved by the BOCC, and then we would implement that going forward.
Francie, you're on mute.
But that doesn't have to be a year from now, right? I mean, you're saying this first year, we're gonna stick with it.
Right, I don't know a year, but I think we want more information. So until we feel comfortable that we've got enough cases that we can review and come up with a solution that would work for, right, all of those. Because I think each case that we're coming across is unique in it, a 1-bedroom or, right, a guest house or all of these different ones. And so I kind of want to see the breadth of what we're talking about first before we try and get in and find a solution for most scenarios in that case.
But Alex, individual exceptions could come in front of the board now.
Right, right. It wouldn't
Yeah.
preclude somebody from coming back in 6 months and saying, or to come back and say, can I have a rebate because I only have been. Those are opportunities for the BOCC, and I think that's why we were so careful in allowing that appeal process. Okay, can we move? We move? Yeah.
Great. So the last point there, something else that we've heard from applicants is, again, potentially different rates or values for properties outside the Aspen area. And the next slide here we have kind of talks to that. So when we're looking at the area, these are all properties that fall within unincorporated Pitkin County. So we're not looking at properties in Aspen, Snowmass. They're near the Snowmass area, but in unincorporated parts. And so the second column there, after we're looking at the area, is the range. And so with these STR properties, what we're able to pull is the range of the average daily rate that they charge for one of these properties. So in Aspen, you could, in theory, find an STR that on the low end is charging $250 per night, but then you can also find one on the high end charging over $20,000 a night per STR properties. And so what we start to see here when we look at the ranges for the different area is we've got a pretty wide range of STR activities, low end of $50 per night, maybe up to Crystal River, to again that high end of $20,000 near the Aspen area. And so I think for an STR market, that might be unique for something across the country. I mean, I'd be interested to see how many other STR markets have this type of variability based on location that you're in. Now the next three columns all kind of work within each other. This information is for this current year, what we've seen. So this isn't taking into account now that the regulations are into effect. There are certain areas that we know have historically advertised lower than that 4-night requirement that we have. So we will be looking at areas in the Crystal or near Redstone to make sure going forward that meets the requirements in the regulation. There are other areas in Aspen and Snowmass that have actually gone above and beyond that historically in their minimum night rentals, just because it might be the business model that works for them. And so again, this is currently year to date what we've seen. We will be watching that going forward to make sure it all meets the regulations. And then bedroom and advertised occupancy, what we see there is there's a kind of 2-to-1 correlation between the number of bedrooms to the number of occupancies, which fits in line with what the regulations have in place. So there are some areas, again, we'll be watching closely to make sure that that's a direct 2-to-1 bedroom to occupancy count, but just some information we were able to currently pull as we're monitoring this with more accurate data.
Yeah.
Yeah, just thinking about the comments I've heard about the 4-night rental and how that's actually changing the economics for visitors who might come up for a weekend. They've got to pay for 4, but they're staying for 2. So we've just doubled the price of a place to stay in Aspen for them. So I can see problems coming from that. It's like, who are we trying? Are we trying to chase out anybody who's not going to stay for, a lot of the weekend trippers, the leaf peepers, the people who come up to ski for a weekend? All of a sudden, are we pricing ourselves out? It's an interesting thing, because if people have to stick to the 4 a night, they charge for 4, or do they half their rate for a 4-night stay, and then just book it less often? I'm not sure I understand how people are going to respond and react to that, and I'd hate to think that we just doubled the cost of coming to Aspen, but more likely, well, I guess we have, really, in a way, by doing that.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that's been a common feedback from speaking to people getting licensed, is that now the family, if a family comes up, they're not going to come up for that extra day. They've already extended their budget, for that weekend. And I think we're talking more about local people, right? Maybe not people who are flying in on their own,
Right.
aircraft.
The Denver day trippers or weekend
Yeah, exactly,
trippers.
exactly, and the leaf peepers and things like that. So that has been one concern and a consistent pushback on the ordinance.
Could you say if you have a area, your zip code is within you know, the Front Range area that you can book for 2 nights. I'm just trying to be creative.
Yeah, no.
I don't know if you can differentiate.
How complicated
I
can
think
it
we're
be?
So-
saving their travel headaches from coming up on Friday night and leaving
Yeah,
on
come up on
Sunday
Thursday, the
morning.
traffic's less. Go home on Monday, the traffic's
Take a
less.
day off from work.
So, and just for the board, you know, the more complicated you make it,
Complicated, we make it.
the more complicated you make it, then the more staff time it'll take to operate it, and we'll
Right.
probably eat into that. And then, just a reminder, I believe the 4-day minimum came out of actually a climate change concern, right? Which was to minimize the number of turnovers at a property that would require it to be serviced and such by,
Right.
whoever's servicing it.
We
And
can
so,
ask the second renter in any given week to decline maid service.
yes.
Or to clean up after the next person. The other question, though, was,
More complicated.
oh gosh, now I forgot. Kelly, did you have, well, I'm rethinking, because I'm thinking about having to clean houses, so.
Sure. Do you know if we are seeing shorter stays with longer bookings and adjustments to rates
Not yet,
accordingly?
it's too soon to kind of have that data. I have heard though that, you know, with like the economy and with, you know, this recession coming on, that more and more people are canceling bookings already into this. So, you know, there's been a lot of, you know, beware, we're gonna in for a leaner ski season, or, you know, seasonal, just, and of course, those are just, you know, random comments, but I don't have data to prove
And then
that.
it'll snow and everybody gets slammed.
It is consistent with revenue projections that you'll be seeing with the
Sure.
budget, though, around sales tax and such.
Has
That is
ACRA done their
COD.
forecast yet?
The what?
Their winter forecast?
No.
Have they done that yet? Okay.
But looking at what we heard this morning from Accra with the airlines, the busiest airports in the world, the 5 of them, whatever, or 3 of them are the big airports that we have direct flights to and from, the major hubs. So that's a real positive they're thinking for this upcoming season. So time will tell. But my
Could you
question
repeat
was.
that?
what-
I didn't understand that. Could you repeat that? What
Oh,
about
the-
Accra?
Accra's saying because of they just came out with the international busiest airports, and I think Atlanta's one, Chicago, DIA is like number 2 in the world, believe it or not. And our airport services 3 of the busiest airports in the country, if not the world, and that is a positive as far as international flights coming in and just you know, flights within the United States, people flying here. So they're anticipating that may be helpful for our ski season numbers. But my other question was, we were talking about 4-night stays. On the other side of that is the impacts. So we need to be looking at our neighbors feeling less of an impact with the 4 nights, because that was one of our things with setting that 4-night, was so we didn't have those flips. Not only the climate issue, but also the impacts to the neighbors. So that would be interesting to see. I think we will maybe, now that people are more aware of this, if there are issues, they'll be more likely to call in and file complaints. So we'll be able to better track those numbers too. Hopefully, we won't have those numbers to track, but if we do have issues, people will know that they have a way in which to file a complaint. Okay,
And just on this range, just if you want to go back real quick, Alex, I mean, that's an average of an average. There's definitely properties that are higher than 20,000 a night. I don't think any lower than 250, but I just wanted to make note of that we have had some that are.
Yeah, and that's year to date. We anticipate that going up as we get into, right, the November, December bookings, when it's prime booking season and they can charge a bit more on their rate. So that's just looking at the first 3/4 of the year. Again, this last quarter, we'll probably see an increase in that.
oh, we will see an increase.
You said none less than 250, but there are lots less than 250.
This says properties near Aspen, though.
That's all we're talking about?
Well, no, that's what she was referring to, because that's the number one thing with the $20,000 high range and the low range of 250 and properties near Aspen.
And is Snowmass Village? Or
No,
Snowmass-
that's unincorporated
Snowmass
around
Creek.
Snowmass. so properties that are near that. But yeah, all these are in unincorporated Pitkin County that we're monitoring.
Got it.
Okay.
So the next couple slides, we want to talk through the workflows. Again, I think it's great for you guys to know, but any member of the public who may be watching this and has to submit their own license request, we'll do a demonstration towards the end. We tried to keep it as, short and sweet as we could, getting the necessary information. So we just maintained the 5 steps here. The first step being an applicant must submit through SAGES. We'll actually do a demonstration of that and show how easy anybody can jump on our software. For those that might have challenges, we're also here in the office or can do digital meetings, and we've done that with many individuals to help them get in. So we don't want that to be a barrier. Once you submit, we just need a couple pieces of information. One, proving that they've rented within that 5-year time period of 2017 to 2022 for the existing STRs as per the county commissioners. Need the assessor's property report. That's how we do the calculations of fee. We want to make sure that they've got the same number that we're looking at. And then the application process, which they go through online. Once that's submitted, staff, i.e. Jeanette here, actually does a review of those. And if there's missing information, allows them to provide that. Or if they're good to go, then they can proceed forward. After they've kind of done that initial review, it's a noticing period. This is where any neighbor next to an STR, an adjoining property neighbor, gets notified that that property has an intent to act as an STR. They're allowed to provide comments to Jeanette, who puts it all in the file, so that way we've got that when we do the final determination. And then the noticing goes out. We wait for 14 days to make sure that all comments are heard. At that point, Jeanette kind of does a final review. Comments are good, fees are paid. Then they're looking to get that license issued. If there's negative comments, if there's issues or concerns, tries to work through the applicant, or if they're so egregious that it has to be rejected, then the license application gets rejected. There is an appeal process, which is on the next slide, and we'll show how somebody can appeal that decision. But that's kind of general what I'd say 90% of applications would go through as far as the workflow.
Question. Is the noticing obligation on the applicant? So
Yes.
they need to post and contact?
We send them a letter, but it's their responsibility to contact or to notify their neighbors, adjoining properties.
Okay, and do they demonstrate proof of that to
They
you?
sign an affidavit stating
Okay.
that they've completed that. And then if in the future we find out that that wasn't completed, we can go back with the affidavit to show that they didn't provide the complete application and issue to revoking it.
Okay, because we have heard some feedback that adjoining neighbors have not been noticed.
Oh, I've heard.
So,
Yeah,
yes,
we
I'm
heard
sure
about
you
one of the
have.
across
Yeah,
the
yeah,
street.
we're working through that, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if looking at it first blush, it looks pretty complicated and time consuming for everybody. And I'm just wondering if streamlining is, if there are ways to streamline it. We'll figure that out, I guess, as we get into it, but it does look pretty bureaucratic and
Intimidating.
complicated out of necessity now, I understand. I'm sure the neighbors are really happy to see this, but the people who are doing it probably aren't. So it's gonna be an interesting path forward.
Well, we do have some of it automated, and so we'll be showing you that
Okay.
access,
And
yeah.
compared to other jurisdictions that require like a course that you have to appear in person to take and, physical
No, that's good to
delivery
know.
of service
Mm-hmm.
to neighbors within 300 feet, things like that. There,
You have to bake a cake. for
other
your
governments
neighbors.
have made it way more
To have a
complicated.
coffee, you have to have a coffee click for people to come over, meet and greet.
Open house, right?
Yeah, I will say, timing of this, even though it looks complex, we, in some cases, can get, the quickest is about 15 days, and that's a perfect application. And that majority of the time is a 14-day comment period. So really, staff can get it in, get the noticing issued within a day, and then it's just waiting for those 14 days for comments to come in. And so we want to allow that so that every neighbor can have that opportunity to provide comment, not rush it. And so we did try and make it as quick as possible. And so 14 to 18 days is really, I'd say, what a majority of these are getting processed in. And again, that's just that 14-day waiting period is really what extends that to that period.
So I have a question, 2 things. There's a typo on 3, number 2. Noticing.
Noticing,
Notice Jim.
noticing. I don't
That's
know
a
what
new
that is.
word, that's a new word for me. But that's minor. The other question is, the serious question, is what about people who've had prior complaints filed against her without the license? Like, we have some neighbors down in the Woody Creek area that have had significant issues with the neighbor. When does that, the prior, the person's been renting short-term rental for X amount of years, so he qualifies for everything, except for the fact that he's had multiple complaints?
I think we capture that in that comments from the neighbors, because they're then providing that comments that this is a property that has had historical issues, and then that's what Jeanette takes into consideration when she either issues or rejects it. And so that would, I think, warrant heavier on the rejection because of that history of violations, whereas some of the other one, people say they're great neighbors, they're good to go, and so, right, makes it easier to say, yeah, this one should be approved.
So when people call us and say, how do we follow up on our previous complaints, we can say as part of the 14-day review. Okay.
And I think any questions, anything like that, best to send to Jeanette or myself, and we can ensure if there's an STR that should have noticed somebody that wasn't, right, then we can grab those comments, put them in, and also note that this person didn't actually follow through in the noticing if they've got a signed affidavit saying they did. And so, right, that's a whole other process we'll work with
Wonder
them.
if I'm not an adjacent property, but the parking issue has overflowed onto my property 3 doors down. And I hear that there's an application coming forward. Can I still then somehow?
We can submit comments.
I think people
We
need
take-
to know that if you're not directly adjacent, but you know that there's an application pending and you've had issues with overflow traffic or trash or noise or whatever, that you still can submit to your department.
And I guess just to clarity, the mailing of the notice has to go to adjoining property neighbors, so that's a requirement by code. But yes, people who are adjacent and might want to provide comments still can, but if they say, why didn't I receive a notice, it's because we're instructing only adjoining property
right.
neighbors to be notified, so.
And we still take all comments into consideration.
Just
And-
want to know, says, we receive a lot of the calls.
A
As you know.
question regarding access, Francie has her hand up. Go with-
Francie, sorry.
Go with her first.
That's what happens when you're not sitting in the room.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to Aspen and then to Redstone. So I have a question about how we're going to weigh what the comments are from neighbors, because there is such a thing as nasty neighbors. And I could see, well, we don't want STRs at our neighborhood, so they would diss everybody who puts in an application. So I'm wondering how you're going to weigh that and authenticate their complaints.
Well, I can speak to that. We're going to collect both sides, and people that have been receiving complaints, I've been encouraging the applicant to submit, their side, and then we'll have a hearing officer look at the case once we put together a package with all the comments in. And hopefully, if it escalates to that, if we see there's equal commenting, then we would escalate it to a hearing officer, and then hopefully they would come up with a determination. If not, then you can.
Right,
hear
or if
them.
you have complaints coming from 4 adjacent neighbors, rather than just from one that you're hearing from constantly, that makes a difference, I would imagine, in weighing.
Thank you.
I just wanted to ask about access roads. Some driveways are 4-wheel drive only in winter, and I'm just wondering, I've seen it in my neighborhood, there are some steep roads, including my own driveway and our street. And if people don't pay attention to, there ought to be a notice on the rental application online even that 4-wheel drive only, because I've pulled people out of ditches. And I'm just wondering if that's, maybe that comes in the comment periods from the neighbors, or maybe it's on the original application, because some places are kind of treacherous and you can't drive up there in your little 2-wheel drive car.
Some people shouldn't be driving up there in their 4-wheel drive
Maybe
car.
they shouldn't, yeah. So anyway, I don't know what the appropriate place is to do that, just wanted to flag it.
Yeah, that's something we've discussed about having site visits, especially rural and remote and some of these other ones in difficult areas. And so we're not exactly sure where that's going to fit into the process, but we're trying to look at that because we do think to understand, right, to get to one of these properties, it probably deserves a site visit of just anybody getting out there before a visitor comes in and also has to try and follow that same path. So we will look to see where that best fits in, and we're keeping that as an option.
Right, and I think some homeowners probably don't need a site visit as much as they just need to think about that. If they're a remote corporation doing an STR, then the site visit makes a lot of sense. If it's somebody who just, maybe need to be reminded in their application, listen, remember to tell people four-wheel drive only, or.
I don't know,
just-
maybe that's something we could add to that application. I think that's a good,
Just
it's a
Now,
good
occurs
point.
remember
that-
again,
my
we
guess
don't
is
wanna
there are
make them
several in the
too
county.
complex because of staff time, but so let's, we think we'll learn a lot this year, especially when we have snow.
That would take the burden off the staff, though,
Yeah.
if it's in the application.
already
like
there.
Reminder.
Yeah. Steve, please?
Yeah, following that same questioning, if I was wondering about the rural and remote, somebody might need a snowmobile or snowshoes or cross-country skis to get there in the winter, and that should be advertised. Also, I've heard of short-term rentals here and other places that were just storage sheds and shacks and very substandard. They weren't anything up to code. So I want to make sure that we are able to inspect at some point in time what people are actually advertising and renting, and how is the process of that going, Alex?
Yes, I think when we do the, to your first question, rural and remote, there's a workflow in 2 slides that will actually go over that process. So we can show how those will come before the board. And I think all of those concerns that you guys have on those applications, you'll be able to address them with the applicant and any concerned property neighbors. As far as the quality of STRs or what they are, we do require that the STR application have a verified license, and that's verified against our GIS's addressing department. Those addresses are used for elections, 911, emergency service, and so we trust that those are going to be, right, if there's an issue for that anybody can get to that property because it's a verified. And so along with that, the assessor's property report are the 2 ways we're trying to ensure that that's an address, main structure property. And if it doesn't fall within a verified address or have an accompanying assessor property report, then that's an immediate red flag to us that that's something we need to look further to. Could be a shack or could be, right, some type of out of code, out-check building that they've got. So those are kind of the ways that we've built it into the process to verify.
Okay. Steve, are you good?
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
good. Thanks, Alex.
All right. Moving us on.
So the next is then getting into the appeal process. This is after a rejection on their license has happened in the normal STR workflow. At that point, the applicant must notify staff within 5 days that they intend to appeal the decision. At that point, staff will get time on the hearing officer's next available schedule, and they'll provide the application, comments, everything, all the supporting documents in the packet. And the hearing officer will then decide. If the decision's overturned, staff will issue the license. If the decision is upheld or maintained, at that point, there's another appeal where the applicant can appeal the hearing officer's decision, and that appeal is then heard by the board. We would schedule time on your next available meetings and, again, provide the packet, everything, and allow the ultimate decision to be handled by the BOCC. At that point, that decision is final. There is no appeal process or any other opportunity for the applicant. So if they were rejected by staff, hearing officer, and BOCC, that would be the final rejection in that scenario, should it arise.
Question about 5 days, sorry.
What are you
Beat
sorry
to it.
about? Why are you looking at me?
Why 5
jumped
days?
in.
If you,
He's
go-
sorry
if they,
about the 5
if they're out
days.
of town and it takes 7 days to appeal it, what happens?
So they have to notify staff within 5 days, so a decision happens Monday. They have to let us know of their intent to appeal by Friday. That appeal doesn't have to take place within 5 days. So we would then schedule on the next available time. So they've got a window to notify us, but then we would find right the next time that works for everyone. It just doesn't allow them to be 2 months and then they come back and ask for an appeal on a decision after we've kind of moved past it. And that's per the code as written in the language.
So then 2 months pass, so they just have to start over? Or is that what happens? They start over, okay, thank you. Just so there's
Yeah, if they
wondering
choose.
if there's not a dead end somewhere in there, okay.
Is the hearing officer making decisions about fine or fee appeals?
No, we actually
Okay.
just had that question confirmed by John. Those are coming directly to you. Hearing officer is only making decision on process and whether the code interpretation was followed.
Okay.
But fee, because that's not in the code specific, that comes to the BOCC here.
I think that's appropriate, because that
Yeah,
sounds
it's a
more
good
like a
question.
policy interpretation, so
Fran?
thank you.
Francie?
I agree with Greg that 5 days is really short. I mean, if you're traveling and you don't even get notice of it for 4 days or something, I would really encourage us to extend that to something like 2 weeks. I know when I get something, I don't even look at my mail sometimes every day. In fact, I never look at my mail every day. So how are they notified, first of all? Is it by mail?
So their rejection would be notified via SAGES, and I'm sure for the first couple of ones, Jeanette would reach out. She's been great about really talking with every applicant through the process, and so they would really be dual notified, one via email in the system, and then one by Jeanette reaching out. But we're happy to extend that into 10 days, if 10 or 14 days, if that makes sense with staff. I think we do just want to put a definitive end date on when that appeal process has to be notified to staff.
And just to be clear, though, that would have to be an amendment to the code,
Yes.
because that's written into the code as, okay.
Yep. So why don't we see how it works, and if we find it's a problem, then we can go through a code amendment, which we might be doing for other issues, and we could do it all at the same time. How's that
Great,
sound?
that sounds good to me.
Francie, did you have anything else?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Okay.
So the last workflow here that we'll kind of walk through is the rural and remote. Really, section 1, 2, and 3 are going to be identical to the other workflow that was presented for anybody else who's submitting for a license request. Where it then deviates is when we're looking at 4 and 5. So the applicant submits through our software, staff does their initial review, there's a noticing period. Once all of that's been completed, this is where staff then provides a recommendation to the BOCC after public comment's been completed. So they either recommend approval of the license or rejection of the license to the BOCC. There's a number of factors that we'd be looking at, right? Safety plan, access, some of the things, and we'll outline it in each packet that's provided to you. And at that point, we'd schedule on your next available meeting. It is a two reading that would need to happen during the regular meeting for this. And there's a noticing period for members of the public who wish to provide comment. And then after those 2 readings, the BOCC provides a final determination whether that license is being issued or rejected. In this scenario, there is no appeal process, there is no hearing officer. The BOCC is the final authority on any rural and remote application.
Item 3, bullet point 2.
We have the same one?
Cut and paste.
Yeah.
Alex does it just to make sure I read things.
There you go.
And
Always
he's
like to
good.
slip one in.
He's always good. Does anybody have any questions about this? I think this was part of our deliberations when we were doing short-term rental ordinance. And we've only had 2.
You will be hearing from them.
Okay.
I mean, it will be on your agenda.
Okay. All right.
So with
You
that.
know there are some 30-plus day rentals happening in rural remote.
In rural remote.
What'd you say, Kelly?
There have been advertised rentals in rural and remote for 30-plus day rentals.
So they don't have to come through the process.
Right.
Yeah, I get it. Thank you.
All right, welcome back, Alex.
Yeah, so what we've got on here, we wanted to take this opportunity with the board and any members of the public watching to actually walk through what a license application is. This is in our test environment, but this is the same system we use for building, planning, EH. We were able to utilize this system for licensing, and we're hoping to maybe potentially bring in some other departments in our organization. So again, kind of, as I mentioned, tried to keep it as short and sweet as we could. So you'll see that there's 4 items that need to be handled at the top. The first is we're asking for the location. Again, we verify this with GIS. So if emergency services need to go out elections, everybody's using the same address. Then we go into an application form. These are the questions we need to provide our review. There's a stage where they can upload files, and then they're confirming and submitting that application. So we'll do this very quickly. It should take us 5 to 7 minutes, and hopefully for any members of the public who might be thinking this is overwhelming, after watching this, they'll see that they can get in and do it too. So first address, you can just type in the number, and we've got this nice drop down of all addresses in the county. We'll just use Elk Mountain Drive there as an example.
Unknown caller.
We're also able with the address to pull parcel numbers, and so we get both of this through our system and a nice map representation of where that's at. And so once somebody's done that, that's confirming the address. They can continue here. And this is where they'll provide some application specific information. So this is a new license type, and it would be for the year 2022. We need to know the owner information to see who's authorized to sign on behalf of that property. In this scenario, we'll just say it's me as the authorized individual.
What's license name?
Oh, sometimes people have specific names that they refer to,
Like the Blue Goose Cottage.
Yeah, exactly. I say that, and people just, oh yeah, this is what it is. And so it's just helpful for us and for them to use that same name.
But it's not a required field.
Not a required, but most people like to put in there whatever that is, just so it's consistent.
It'd be nice to make that a little clearer. I didn't understand that either. So property, licensed property name or owner,
Perfect point. We'll do a quick edit.
DBA,
Doesn't take us
right,
too
yeah.
much.
if that's
Cute name.
sugar plum.
Yeah, DBA is a good reference.
You're in a sugar plum world today.
The other
your ADU?
The other thing that we've got is we have a lot of properties owned by entities, LLCs, trusts, and so we also have the ability to capture that when that case arises. Going further down, so this is the primary property contact. It's not always the owner, but in case of an emergency, who do we need to reach out to resolve a matter? So when they're coming in, we've got that information. An issue arises on any property, we can go right into this application and know exactly who to call for that. So I think that was something we heard from your discussions as well, wanting to know who's that point of contact immediately.
And just so you know, that's the primary person that I speak to, because a lot of times the owners are somewhere else or not available. So that's a really important piece.
So like if it's the Romero Group, for example, that's managing the property.
Called
Yeah.
Wayne.
And they're usually the ones submitting the applications.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're the representative.
We do have cases where there's multiple owners. We just like to capture every owner in that scenario because, again, we need authorization from all owners if there's multiple individuals or knowing all individuals representing that entity. And so this is just for that case. We've had few come in that actually have this, but we just give that opportunity to capture it.
And all the owners will probably thank you for that, because that way they all know if it's being rented.
Right, yeah. Want to make sure everybody's aware we're not
When
giving
they
it the
come
wrong-
home and there's somebody in their bed.
Right.
So this STR app form, what I tell people, this is the nuts and bolts of STR data that we're looking for. This came out of a lot of discussions that I think the commissioners had or requests that we need to verify. And so some questions, what's the square footage? Is the entire residence available or not? This is once we start building out that data, we'll be able to report how many are renting out the entire residence versus not, and then look to do some type of adjustment in the fee. When we look at the net number of bedrooms and then the max number of renters intended to occupy, once we pull that assessor's report, we verify how many bedrooms do they have per environmental health, 2 people per bedroom. And so then we know, right, if they've got 4 beds, they can have 8 intended individuals there, or if they have 2 rooms, right, 4. And so this is where we're doing a lot of that adjustment as people come in and they might say, I've got 2 bedrooms, but I'm putting 10 guests as a max number. We say, hey, your septic actually can't, accommodate that. We're doing a 2 people per bedroom. This now needs to be 4, and so that's that cleanup. There will still be a piece on the compliance for those that don't come in for licensing, but this is how we're working through some of that. I will just fill in some answers to.
Just about that,
Yeah, go ahead,
before you
Francie.
go off of that. I thought we did 2 per bedroom plus 2. I thought that was what we
That's not
passed.
how it-
That was the original text of the language, that was the original language in one of the first drafts. Environmental health had made a comment based on off-site wastewater treatment system permitting and design requirements that had it at 2 per bedroom, and had recommended to the board that the STR licensing be consistent with that design and off-site wastewater treatment system criteria. So that it was changed to 2.
And Francie and Steve, I want to apologize. Your raised hands are only showing up on the big screen, not on my iPad. So if I'm looking at my iPad, I don't see you guys. So you
It's
can
fine,
always
you're
holler.
doing great.
You can
Grace.
always holler at me.
Okay, thanks.
Great question. The other one that I just call out here is the number of nights intended to rent in a licensed term. These 3 tiers or categories are the ones that were presented before the commissioners. So if somebody's intending to rent out the max number of nights, 61 to 120, they're in the highest fee tier category versus somebody wanting to do 20 nights or less. So this is then how on the back end we're making the system calculate that formula or fee amount, and so that Jeanette's not having to do that herself.
Nice.
And I'm gonna have to reject your application because you have too many guests.
Yeah, I got 6. Let's
many
make sure it
what?
gets there.
There's too many guests in this place.
He had
Yeah.
8.
We also provide a link here so that members of the public can go find their assessor property report. So continuing with the example that I've got, Elk Mountain Drive, this would be the property report that I would download. And when I go into my Sages process, after I've downloaded a copy, I can then upload it in my next form here. This is informational, again, just based on the address you gave us. We tell you the fire district, caucus, master plan, school. A lot of people just like to see this because they've never known that information. And we do think, knowing your fire district is probably good for somebody, doing some SDR activity. So then again, getting to step 3, this is where you're gonna have to give us some uploads. I go through, right, I have all of these documents on my computer. All of these aren't the ones, but I'll just throw in some tests. And I provided those documents that you requested, and I'm saying, here's my working smoke detectors, here's my parking plan, here's my rental history and safety plan. So based on what I entered in the application, there's certain required documents. This is how I can find them from my computer, say here it is, and upload. And that is it. So again, hopefully that was 5 to 7 minutes, pretty quick. But that's all a member of the public needs to do. They've now submitted and they're reviewing that. And so, yeah.
I was
great.
just thinking with your parking plan file, might be the perfect time to say access, 4-wheel drive versus 2-wheel drive, difficult road, however you frame it, so people could,
Steep slopes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Black Diamond Road access, you use the ski slope
Yeah.
designations.
Well, we could add that as a.
Access plan.
Required
As a
file.
required
Right, yeah,
file.
just.
Because right now it's not required. For rural and remote it is, but
Right.
for general unincorporated it's not. But that's a good idea to add that.
So occurred to the second part of that question is, we've got homes that go back in age to, well, the oldest house in Aspen is an 1890s cabin over on the west end, but there are non-conforming homes built in the last century in rural and elsewhere that might not be able to even, they may have been renting to local skiers and workers or doing STRs even, who knows, month rentals, but they may not be able to work in this system. So I'm wondering how many people have not contacted you for that reason. And it'd be great to bring them into the fold, but is it just not possible?
You mean they wouldn't come into compliance as a
Say there's
rental?
a compliance issue because it's I don't know, we'd have to think of, maybe there wouldn't be many, but I just wonder. Houses over 50 years old may have a hard time meeting any criteria. And it's been going on, so they're gonna be outside the sphere, and that kind of
Talking
defeats
like
the
life
purpose.
safety type stuff?
I don't, well, possibly,
Well, I think
or
that's
just
one of the
possibly
requirements is of the dwelling, the unit has to
have to meet a certain
comply
safety
with
standard.
Yeah, it has to
What I'm
comply.
wondering is how many might not.
So you can grandfather in your own risk, but you can't grandfather in
Well,
tenant, like
I'm just wondering if
renters
that's
or
crazy.
visitors.
You
Could
can
create
limit
a
it, but you can't let
hesitancy.
anybody
Yeah.
else.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we will show the monitoring side of this, and so for those that might not come in because of some type of issue, we are aware of them, and we will start reaching out again to say now you are out of compliance and kind of go down that path. So I think when we show you the monitoring, hopefully that'll kind of answer some of that question of how at least we're trying to approach it when we know that there are ones that fit this regulation but haven't come in. And so we'll talk through what that component will be, because that is, now that we've gone through the effective date, where we're looking is the code enforcement compliance component of this whole process.
Right.
But there is a piece that there will be some that are under the radar, that don't advertise, and they're just renting it out to friends and family, and so maybe it's not up to code, but maybe we would not know that because
Sure, no doubt there are.
they
yeah.
don't advertise. So I'm sure there's,
Well, it'd be great
that
to be able to
activity.
offer honey in addition to the vinegar, you know, when
with the
when they
carrot
get
and
that
the
letter.
stick, the carrot
Yeah.
and the stick.
Maybe there's an incentive to
Okay,
come into
Francie,
the
and
fold.
then I know we started a little late, but we are gonna have to start. But Francie, did you have another question?
Yes, I just wanted to say to Alex and Jeanette, I think that's a really well done application. Good job, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Francie.
We had anybody have concerns about having to file a parking plan and having to file this plan and that plan?
Questions, I think, but once
No.
we work through it with them of.
They realized it's easier
Yeah.
than they thought.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I know we got short on time, just got a couple, two sections
That's okay,
really.
we're good.
We want to talk about the public outreach that's also been done along with this effort. It's been pretty intense and involved, really by Jeanette, Marcy up in the admin office, and we've done a lot to try and get the word out. So when the regulations were approved, right around, I think July 15th, we came out with a how to submit license document here. And so as soon as the applications were able to be taken in, we provided a document showing screenshots, doing essentially what I just did with everybody here, but in a document format. And so we put that out immediately. Following up on that, we actually did a grassroots video with John Peacock and Marcy, and we talked through, right, the regulations, the background, the process, and just tried to do, again, what we just did here together in the room in a video format that somebody could look up. So if they preferred watching a video or a document, they had both of those options. And the follow-up to that is we've actually sent out letters to properties. And so I'll show you all the properties that we're currently monitoring. On the left there was a document that was sent out to the owners stating, hey, you've been identified as having some level of STR activity in the past. Pitkin County has new STR regulations that are going into effect. Please proactively go in, submit a license application so that you can be in compliance when it comes into effect, and links to the code, links to everything. And so with that, we got a great response rate. I think probably another 60 applications came in since that letter went out.
Yep.
And so a lot of people said, hey, I didn't know about this. I got a letter. Now I want to work through it. The right-hand side, we've got a nice infographic that I think Marcy and even Abby here might have
Abby.
put together.
Abby did.
So
Good job.
great,
She
great
Gets
help.
She gets a lot of kudos.
And, you know, QR codes, quick explanation of why, of how bringing all of those different documents together into a one-stop shop that we've got posted everywhere. And so really trying to continue to do this outreach so that people have the tools they need to submit an application. And then the last piece, this is our short-term rentals website. We've got a link to the software, a link to a help session that you can set up where Jeanette will reach out to you, schedule some time to actually walk through the application, that how-to video, the how-to guide, and then the infographic. And so all of that's available today on our STR website for any members of the public who might just need something to help get that application through.
Kelly?
Can we get a few of those printed to bring tonight?
In
Just have for
Redstone?
people?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, some of the info guide, you mean?
The infographic
Yeah,
page.
infographic.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe more than a few.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then the last piece, if there's nothing else on the outreach, we'll be talking monitoring and enforcement. And so I think on this one, we'd really been looking and made a concerted push to get the licensing process out, and then all the licenses in the queue issued. Now we're kind of turning our gears towards the monitoring and enforcement. Up to this point, the letters that were sent out that were shown earlier, they were sent out by Rentalscape. Rentalscape is a third-party software that monitors and does some compliance for us. I'll bring up their map that we've got, and it's a really great map to see where the activity is happening. But now that the regulations are in place and properties are out of compliance, Rentalscape will be sending a follow-up letter, and this is bullet point 3 here. They'll be sending up a letter to all properties operating without that license. So that's going to be the first point of contact to these properties saying, hey, you're out of compliance, there are regulations in effect. The way that we confirm they're in compliance is they have to post their STR license number on every posting. We've got that number in our system, and so it's a one-to-one verification. Pretty easy to see who's got it and who doesn't. Once the letter's gone out, then the follow-up kind of contact will be done by Jeanette, and that's something we're really trying to work through now, whether it's in coordination with the attorney's office, where that handoff needs to happen, and how we proceed with some of the ones that I think everybody's heard has come in over the past weekend that we're looking at. Let's see, let me bring up Rentalscape. So this is a software. The reason we went with 2 different softwares for the licensing component and the monitoring, Sages didn't have a monitoring component side. Unfortunately, they're more geared towards application workflow, right? Somebody submits something, a review's done, fees are paid, and an issue or a final product. Rentalscape was great in this monitoring portion of it. We thought that what they're able to do with their data really complemented Sages nicely, and because we can export our license information and import it into this software, that one-to-one verification just seemed like a better integration there. And so you see here, this here is a map of Pitkin County, and we see dots with some level of STR activity. And so, right, if there's a specific area you want to hone in on, say maybe Redstone that we're traveling to later tonight, we can start to see each of these are color-coded based on whether it's an active STR, a pending identification, or a property that needs more information. But we can look to see, okay, what's the revenue? What's the bedroom count? Where is this at? And if I wanted to click and get more information, then I can kind of go within that exact property. And so this will be things that we start checking pretty frequently to see, you know, what's their nightly booking? Do they have any future bookings? Do they have their license number listed? Are there any violations? And so, sorry, I clicked out of that. But this is then kind of where the monitoring enforcement starts to pick up on. This is a software we have, and we think it's going to be really great as we start to get more into the enforcement side.
So if I don't know where to go, can I just go to the county website and put in search short-term rental licensing, and will it pull up those sites?
Yeah, I
Just
can-
for people who are just very generic.
So in that case, let's just
And do
bring
those
that up.
numbers represent the number of STRs, or what are the numbers on the
I know
blue
there were
dots?
4 in the Nori colony.
Yeah, we can talk through a little bit of what that is, but quickly to your question, Patty, in the top I put short-term rentals.
And it pulls
If you
that.
put that in, it's bringing the ordinance and, oh, this is the first webpage. So that first
Perfect.
search does get you there.
Okay.
Greg, so some of these are numbers, but they are number of listings. So one property can have multiple listings on VRBO, Airbnb, Flipkey. And so you're seeing artificially high numbers. So
Got it.
we might have 343 identified properties. Of that, there's 975 listings. So you almost have a 3-to-1 listing to property ratio because most people like to list on the big 3. Where they're not listing on the big 3, we're getting that in their application process. When they show us that 5-year rental history, we're identifying other properties where they're actually, or other sites where they're listing, and then we're starting to notify Rentalscape, hey, this person also lists on this website. And so it starts to monitor that website as well. And so we're making sure that they might not be on the big 3, they might have created their own, but we're also monitoring that website going forward.
Make sure their license number's there, et cetera, et
Correct.
cetera. Okay. Okay.
And no questions for the BOCC. I think all of this was just informational. Bring most of that back before you. because we have committed that this is a living document. As we get better data, we want to bring it back to you in case there's any changes or potential areas you'd like us to look at.
And how will we be presenting this information tonight, technology-wise?
There's a different presentation for this afternoon in Redstone. It is more specific to Redstone, with some base level zoning information that we thought was necessary.
And we have the technology available at the church.
I'll have my laptop
We're gonna have the laptop and a projector, I think.
that I can present off my laptop,
Just
which
to
should,
make sure, because it's a little different up there.
yes.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
You guys rock.
Yeah,
Thank
this
you.
was good.
Thank you.
Thanks. That's very helpful.
So I'm
Thank
trying
you,
to figure out
guys.
where to go on vacation in the unincorporated areas of Pickett County. Good luck. No, I know. Okay, we are good. We will be back at 1 o'clock. So we will see everybody back here then. Thank you, Grassroots. Thanks, guys. And
Thank you.
we're not. Welcome back. Today is Tuesday, September the 27th, 2022. This is the Board of County Commissioners for Pitkin County. This is our work session agenda, and we are so glad to finally have before us APCHA, the Aspen-Pitkin County Housing Authority. They have a great presentation to provide to us today. So gentlemen, would you please introduce yourselves for the public record? And the floor is yours, and thank you for coming.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Matthew Gillen, and I am the Executive Director of APCHA.
And I'm Andrew Miller. I am the business analyst for APCHA.
And we have some distinguished colleagues on the bench in case
On
we
the
need
bench.
to. We have Bethany and Cindy over there as well in case we need anything. So I'm very excited to be here to talk to you guys. I'm the Executive Director of APCHA, and I've been here. It'll be actually a year next month.
Since you've been here?
Yes,
Really?
time flies, yeah. And I come, and just to refresh your memory, I come from 23 years with the State Department, in Washington and overseas, and I had kind of a specialization in immigration and passport, with a consular track, we called it. So I have a lot of experience with assessing people for benefits, telling them yes, or telling them very politely, no, you do not qualify, and also a lot of management experience, which is, I think, what they liked. So although I don't have a housing background, I do have a lot of experience with government and benefits, which is, I think, being very applicable here in APCHA. And as I chat, please, if you have any particular questions, just jump right in. So what we're going to do today, I've got the work plan which APCHA put together and did the board we did last year, and I'm going to walk through that to show you what we did, and then I'm going to walk through what the new work plan, which is what we're going to do, and then if there are anything in particular you want to chat about, let me know. And I'll do that for a little bit, and then the real meat of the presentation is Andrew, who has some wonderful statistics and slides from HomeTrek, which will really illustrate a lot of the different aspects of APCHA and our stock and what we're trying to do. So, does that sound good?
That sounds good.
Great.
And just so my other two board members know, Francie and Steve, we will be, this item on our agenda is an hour, and then we're going to take a few brief minutes to do our Board of Health appointments before the board heads to Redstone. So please just be prepared to have that decision handy, because we'd like to put it on our consent agenda for tomorrow. Okay, gentlemen, please.
So on the left of this slide, you'll see it says APCHA team, then HomeTrek, then regulations, and then further down, it'll say community engagement, seller standards, and HOA capital reserve. So those were the main focus areas that APCHA put together, ready to work on from September 2021 to August 2022. And there's obviously always lots of other things that pop up, but those were the things they felt they could look at the time. So, Andrew, you go back to APCHA team. So, the first one, onboarding new executive director. Huge success. So here I am, ready to be with you guys. So here we are. So, and then you're going to see one crossed out that did not happen. So that said hire staff to manage home inspections and capital repairs program. So that's kind of been put on the back burner, and then that'll you'll come across that again as we go further down. This next one was they wanted to look at see if we could find a data analyst and a housing policy analyst to help the city, and then also some of the time with APCHA to look at some of those broader trends in our housing stock, both for the city and then we would get access to. And that person has been hired. She started this summer. Liz, what's Liz's last name? Augsburg. She's a...
You couldn't remember Oxford?
Yeah, it's a tricky night. So Liz has joined us and has already been put to work by APCHA. She presented at a board meeting recently, and she did a wonderful analysis of a survey we put out this summer about right sizing. So rather than just looking at the survey, Liz really dove in and did a fantastic analysis for us, which we presented. Was it last time? Yeah, last time to the board. Yeah.
And I shared those results with this board.
Now, the next one was a hire we have not been able to make, which was, we had some money put aside for a grant. It was more like a grant finder than a grant writer, but to look for federal and state funding. And we've put out an RFP several times, and we have not received anybody interested in that particular position. And I've even pursued a few local contacts who also have not done that. So I don't know. I just think in a full employment economy, that is not something people are particularly looking at, which is a shame. But we'll still keep an eye on that with that.
Can I just give it?
Yes, ma'am.
editorial? Okay, is that okay? This was a position that I had advocated for in order to help leverage funds that are available at the state for things like low to no interest loans if somebody has an emergency repair that they need, or roof replacement or something like that, to help kind of stand up that kind of program in APSHA to make sure we're maintaining our inventory over time.
Which hopefully
Just a
we'll
little
have
bit of
more money
context.
available in this next
Yes.
year from the
Yeah.
state. We can work on
We
it.
just need help getting it.
And remember, this is last year, so we're not, it'll be a little repetitive when we go into next year. So on the home trek side, was that the first full year of home trek?
Yes.
Andrew, yeah. So last year was the first full year of home trek. So Andrew was working very hard to see how to use it most strategically. And the one I really want to highlight there is the second one, develop quarterly reports. So now Andrew is coming to the board quarterly, and we have a set of slides and data points which we're developing over a series of time to show what's happening with the housing stock that APSHA has. So you'll see that in many ways in Andrew's presentation in a little bit. And then the other very important one was the home trek lottery process, which was very important because it needed moving from the old-fashioned lottery process, which was not too far removed from ping pong balls in the basket, which they used to do, was to automate that. That's not the right word, is it? To put it on, to do it through home trek, digitize it. And that required a lot of testing to make sure that that it was in fact giving the right, the people's chances were being accurately reflected. I was about to say randomized. That's not quite the right term because some people have different chances in there. And then we had to test that very, very rigorously to make sure that people had full faith in the lottery process, and that went very well as well.
Can I comment on that
Yes.
as well? So they did hire a third-party auditing firm
Right.
to do that testing and make sure that, so APSHA wasn't auditing itself to make sure that the lottery process was coming out accurately. They hired a firm to do that on their behalf.
At first, I thought he said water testing. He said
Sorry.
lottery testing, so I have to get the accent.
I'll try to
Turn
talk
your ears
more.
on.
I'll try to talk more American. Sorry.
That's okay. I like the accent better.
And then regulations. This is in many ways the bread and butter of the board is looking at regulations. So these a selection of the regulations that was discussed last year. There was a lot of talk about changing the OEZ. I wasn't actually around for that, but that in the end that was not changed. There were lots of different options to look at, including using all of Colorado. I think there was even some discussion of not changing it at all. And just to remind everybody, the OEZ is basically the Roaring Fork Valley, but that is the area in which you cannot own another property if you are in. There's only really 3 rules for APSHA. You have to work in Pitkin County, you have to live in your house, and you can't own another property in the OEZ. So that was, in the end, that was not changed. Right sizing was also shelved, but as you'll see in the next the next slide, we are doing a lot of work on right sizing. Dependent age was changed from 24 to 19. So that went down, and that was just to reflect that people coming in with college-age kids are in a different situation than people with kids who are under 19. So that changed as well. And the retirement, this is the retirement time in ABSHA housing, in which you'd be able to stay in ABSHA housing, went from working for being there for 4 years to 10, right? Right. So that I got it. Right. So that just tightens up the amount of time you have to stay in ABSHA housing before you can retire there. So it's a workforce housing program, but the community has always been very clear throughout the years that we certainly don't want to kick people out as soon as their retirement. So it just did increase the amount of time you're going to be in the housing program before you can retire in there, which I think is a very reasonable time, 10 years. And then we also just tweaked when you're bidding, so you can now bid up one category. And then we just tweaked the deed restriction a little bit as well. Okay, want to go to the next slide?
Does that all make sense to everybody?
Yeah.
Great.
Okay.
We're good.
This one, we are very aware this is a big deal, and this is a big problem, which we are very aware of. But I think everybody's aware that there are some ongoing litigation, so this is not possible to tackle right now. So that's stay tuned for that one. Go down again.
To seller standards or
Yeah,
HOA?
yeah. Go down to the next.
There's only 2 pages.
Oh, that it? Okay, great. Oh, seller standard. How do I skip that? This took up a lot of time, and it's a very important part of the whole program. And because there's a tension there between buyer and seller. There's always a tension there. The buyer wants the full price. The seller wants the cheapest price. So, in the
Vice versa.
Other way around.
You know what I mean. The buyer wants top dollar. The seller.
One more time.
I did not have anything to drink at lunch.
You get
actually.
this. You get it.
Maybe that's the problem.
So there's a tension there, and people want different things. What we have seen is that people are so desperate for housing in Aspen and in Pitkin County that the people buying the house will sometimes settle for really homes that should have been improved, and in a normal market environment there'd be more negotiation on the price, but people feel such pressure in Aspen that they will take the home, because if they don't, the next person will. So this was efforts to improve that situation. So now we have a neutral party starting in January. There's a formal inspection program where a professional comes in during each sale and does a home inspection, and it's just like any normal home inspection, but that had not necessarily been on the books before with ABSHA. So now we're making sure everybody that somebody else is going through the house and listing issues with it. And that is the basis for the back and forth between the buyer and the seller. Right, and so then we are also we'll continue to look at capital repairs regulation outside the deeds restriction. We did look at, this was work completed last year. We spent a lot of time looking at a possible pilot program where ABSHA would exercise the right of first refusal on properties, own the property, own the mobile home, scrape and replace it, and then sell it back into the housing stock. We did a lot of outreach for Woody Creek. That was the proposed area where we would pilot this program. There was a lot of community feedback, and at this time we are not doing a formal pilot program using Woody Creek. We do have the right to do it in as much as we have right of first refusal, and we can buy a property and improve it and sell it back, but we're not doing it in terms of a formal pilot program centered at Woody Creek. And that was reflective of a lot of community outreach we did, and Kelly was there at some of it. Okay.
Could you elaborate a bit more just on the capital repairs regulation? You know, it hasn't happened, but
I'm not, let's see, capital repairs regular, I wasn't here.
I mean, we did
Yeah.
update the standards so that after the inspection
I think that's what's right,
happens,
yeah.
certain life safety standards have to be met, or they either get completed before it goes to lottery, or the price is adjusted downward before it goes to lottery. And so that happens now prior to somebody winning a unlivable unit.
Unit that's not.
Yeah. So we did do that.
Great. We move to the next,
What else? I feel like there was something else in this scope.
Next year's.
yeah, and we'll go to next year. Plenty of time. All right, so this is kind of broadly, as well as the normal regulations. In my time at APSHA,
Sorry.
I
I would like us to talk about the, at some point, how we're working with CORE.
yeah,
and
that's actually not on
adjusting-
here because it was
okay.
yeah. I'll
Thank
hold
you.
that thought.
I wasn't
I'll
sure
do
if
that.
where
That's a great
was.
one.
Thank you.
I really want to increase communication to the community, and you'll see that highlighted here. And then increase both, I hate to say the amount of compliance, because that sounds a little draconian, but revamp our compliance program, which preserves the integrity of the system by making sure the rules are being followed. Because people have faith in APSHA when they know that the rules are being followed. The rules are written down, they're in our regulations, everybody can see them, but people will trust APSHA when they know that, know what's going on, know what the qualifications are, and have faith that we are taking steps to make sure people follow those rules. So you'll see that under Hire a Compliance Manager. Right now, our compliance program is being run by Bethany, who has many other responsibilities, and we are really tackling the most egregious and high-profile compliance cases. You may have seen a few in the paper. There'll be a few more coming out fairly soon. But Bethany has many other responsibilities as well. She's put in a huge amount of work on some of these cases, but I've put in a budget request for next year with the city for a new position, which would report to Bethany, which would be taking a somewhat more systematic and approach to some of these compliance cases, including looking at our biannual affidavit program, following up on complaints, and looking at the best way for it to do it. And part of that also will be paying a bit more attention to the rental compliance side. We have quite a few people who have had leases renewed in the past year or two, even though they owe us money, which is a little silly. So we need to, we're going to be working on that, which I think feeds into confidence in APSHA and the integrity of the system. We're still, at that second point there, you've seen the grant person, we still have the money for that, and we're going to be still working on that, seeing if we can find somebody to make sure we have access to any money which might be lying around at the federal or state level. Home Track, we are refining the quarterly reports, but the two top ones are underway right now. This is not using new money. This is using existing money to rebuild the community portal, which is the portal clients and customers use to create their own account, to apply to apply and qualify for APSHA. So we're taking some leftover money for that and rebuilding our community portal. We have a contract signed. We've started work on that, and we're very excited. This is going to make things even easier on the home track side for clients and customers to get access to home track. Anything else you want to add? Yeah, I mean that.
Yep.
And it's we're kind of taking a almost like a TurboTax model where you'd put it, you create an account and then you'd go through a screen one by one and upload your documents as needed. Compliance, this goes down. We've mentioned this, I mentioned this already in terms of the team. We want to hire a compliance manager, increase the volume of audits, which is I think important. Look at different ways to increase compliance for renters, perhaps an affidavit for renters, and a renewed emphasis on rental compliance. Julia, our property manager for rentals, she's been away on maternity leave this summer, but she's back very soon, and we're going to be meeting with her monthly to look at our rental program. And the next one is some of the regulations we're looking at. So the right-sizing program we mentioned briefly. This is the idea, and you'll see this in some of Andrew's, in one particular Andrew's slides later on. We do have a number of people, for example, a couple whose kids have moved on, so now there's a couple living in a 4-bedroom house. So you could argue that those bedrooms are surplus, and so we're trying to figure out ways to encourage people to right-size, to move. And while I have the public forum, I want to make it very, very clear that that is 100% voluntary. There's a little bit of concern out there in the community that APSHA would somehow be making people downsize or right-size. We can't. We don't have the legal authority because you own it, and B, we don't want to. And we made that very clear. There was a unanimous formal vote by the board to make that very clear. So any right-sizing would be voluntary, and we're trying to fish around for ideas to make that an enticing proposition for people right now. We're not talking in terms of writing checks at this point. That's a very, very different conversation. So we'd be looking at the way to do that.
With the survey we received, that you shared with us, what was the uptake? It was funny, there was a disconnect between the newspaper headline that said nobody's interested, but what I saw was 30% were interested.
I think the headline writers and the authors are always in conflict. I thought it was pretty good. I can't remember specifically what the percentage was.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of people. I think it was well over half of people in that position said they would, consider it rather than saying absolutely not. So that's excellent data, and it's going to enable us to target somewhat our incentives as we encourage people to right size. The appreciation schedule. Oops, that's right. We're also looking at that. Currently, it is generally 3% or simple, not compound, per year, or the CPI increase, whichever is less. And that's one of the things we're going to be looking to see if that still works. And then also a lot of work going to be just on the ownership categories themselves. Are they still working? Are those, are they still working?
And some of that is what we've talked about here. Is AMI a relevant number to use?
Does it apply to us?
Yeah, we're going to be spending a lot of time, we already are, spending a lot of time on revamping our communications and community engagement. We are doing, and we will continue doing, hopefully do even more outreach in Spanish. We're doing a 3 times a year newsletter now, which is in Spanish too. I'm doing a Facebook Live session monthly, usually on the third Wednesday of the month, and I do that at noon. I mean, there's usually the topic, like Andrew's been on there on talking about home track and how to access it, and my DMs are open for questions anytime if people want to chat then. And we've done one, we did one in Spanish as well with me and Julia talking about how to apply both for rentals and to buy stuff, to buy a property, and we did that in Spanish too. So trying to work very hard on outreach to the community, both in English and Spanish. We're going to be revamping some of our other programs, like, for example, rights and responsibilities as an APSHA owner-renter. Cindy has reached out to our lawyer who used to come in for kind of lunch and learn, not our lawyer, but a lawyer on HOA advice. So we're going to be getting that person back in, hopefully in January, fairly often, probably quarterly, to talk to any HOAs who'd like to discuss some of their issues. More community listening sessions, and generally making sure people in Pitkin County understand what APSHA is. It's not all housing. We have actually a very distinct subset, how it fits together, your role, city's role, the board's role, and then us at staff and our role, and reminding people of the very basic requirements for ownership, which of course are living in the property, working in Pitkin County, and not owning anything outside the OEZ. It's not that hard. We just want to remind people how it all works. And then the last two, hopefully we'll be able to make some work on capital reserves, and then also we are looking at again the capital repairs program and figuring out some of that's really tough stuff there on how we maintain the sustainability of the housing stock, make sure people look after their properties as they own them. You know, you own the property, but you need to have an ownership mentality rather than a renter's mentality where, you know, somebody else will take care of it when I sell it. So those are very tough issues, but we are committed to keeping to work on that. And then Kelly wanted me to also mention one thing. We did a project this summer with CORE, where we worked with CORE and we mailed out a flyer to all ABSHA owners where they could apply for a energy efficiency grant, not a rebate, but actual money. And CORE has done at least 60 energy evaluations for ABSHA owners. So you see what your property looks like, and then there was money available for a certain number of them to actually do upgrades. And actually, it's funny you mention that because I just wrote to them today and just asked for how's everything going. But that's been very successful. It improves ABSHA's brand, and as much as we're trying to look after our owners, and also it's great work for CORE as well. So we look forward to more collaboration with CORE and with other community organizations in the Valley. So I
just want to comment a little bit on that. And those expenditures can get added on to the value when someone goes to sell for energy efficiency improvements in their units.
At the end of the day.
We're getting some clarity about if they got a grant, whether they should get to add that onto the resale. It's a little bit of double dipping. So we have to have that conversation at the board. And then another program we did, and I'll look to you guys if I don't say this correctly, was allowing owners to enter into a new deed restriction who have reached their maximum 10% cap on improvements that they've done, that they could enter into a new deed restriction and have that cap reset. And so they have that max and then can do another 10% above that for improvements to their units. So incentives for continuing to maintain individual units over time. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Any questions before we move on to Andrew?
Just real quick, Eagle County did a great program with Northwest Colorado Council of Governments with the weatherization program over there. They did it at the Dot Cerro Mobile Home Park. They've been going in and retrofitting, making them pretty much all electric, getting them off propane. They found that some of the mobile homes literally were bombs. They had propane leaking out in the subgrade of the mobile home units. And it's been very, very successful. I think their total capital investment per unit is maximum of about 25,000. People are making huge energy savings. It's more than windows, it's new furnaces, it's ground heat source pumps, it's a whole gamut of things. It's a great program and it's worked really well, something we may want to consider doing with some of our mobile home parks. So at some point I'll get more information, more specifics, and bring it back. It was a very interesting presentation at the
Great.
COG meeting.
Thanks.
It was actually at the conference.
Okay, right, yeah.
All right, I'm gonna shift over to my presentation. So just one thing to note, this is kind of a look back on all the quarterly reports I presented to the board, so you're gonna see kind of numbers in a larger scale than just on a specific quarterly basis.
Before you get too far into this, I just want to ask for some clarification on, does this board approve the work plan in our IGA?
I don't think so. I don't know if we've ever.
I think we do. That's why I wanted to.
Cindy's,
It's part of the.
Or is it the
budget process,
strategic
I
plan?
believe. I think it comes along with the budget itself.
So I wrote that section. Sure. That it's a work plan right ahead of budget, and then budget should align. I believe it's a work plan ahead of budget, and then the budget aligns to the work plan for approval. And that way there's some alignment going in between the bodies.
Thank you. So we'll see this again in the more formal setting. Okay. Thank you.
All right.
Sorry to
Oh,
interrupt.
No, not a problem. So just as a note, this is data through the end of June, the end of the second quarter. Third quarter ends actually in a few days, so I don't have that full data set yet to add quarter three into this specific presentation. So just want to make sure that we're aware of that. So first page I want to talk about is just general total inventory as it relates to APCHA. I kind of broke it down into different sections here as of today, as of June 30th. Our total inventory was 3,129. Within that, ownership units are broken down into about just over 1,600. And then I broke it down again so you could see the difference between how many of those are attached, how many of those are detached ownership units. Rentals, we have 1,360, vast majority of those being long-term rentals and a handful, relatively speaking, being seasonal rentals. And then this last category, total other units, is really kind of a catch-all for some of those other ones that we're working through. This ownership rental unit, I'm actually going to have Cindy, if you can give a quick sentence or two on what this is with regard to what the commissioners could know.
Well, they are
You have to come up.
deed-restricted units that
Bring her
are
up.
required to be.
Cindy, you need to come up to a mic. Thanks, Greg.
Sorry, Cindy, thank you.
They are ownership type units, but they have to be rented out to a qualified employee. So there's like next to the City Hall, the Mill Street Station they're all ownership units, but they have to be rented out to qualified employees. And they're kind of scattered throughout the city and Pickens County.
And then with regard to music rooms over at Merle, there are 11 units that are not occupiable as a living space, but we do rent those out in both the summer and the winter season for us, depending on what our regulations state. So we do get revenue from them, but they are not livable spaces. And then these 5 down here at the bottom, those are ones that we're still clarifying what is the ownership type. Are they detached? Are they attached? Are they long-term seasonal? Are they are they long-term or are they seasonal there? So we've really taken some time to make sure we've clarified this. I think when we started within Home Trek, there were probably about 100 of these ownership type equals blank. So we've really, in those cases, we have to dig into the formal deed restrictions to read exactly what are the specific restrictions on those units to make sure that we have it correctly reflected within Home Trek.
Could you just elaborate a little bit? So the music rooms are actually places where people sleep, or are they something
No,
else?
they're non-livable spaces.
They're totally
but they can be
non-livable.
rented out as a part of revenue for APCHA.
Oh, interesting.
Wow, yeah.
So it's an empty, that's a music
Yep,
Practice-
it
it's
is,
a
it's pretty
rehearsal
small.
practice hall.
Yes,
So
exactly.
you can sleep on the piano or
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
tuba.
hey, let's rent those babies out. And then attached ownership, detached, I just want to make sure I understand what that means.
So attached meaning that there is a shared wall with another unit, whether it's deed restricted or not. Detached meaning it is a standalone single-family home.
Got it, thank you.
All right, gonna move on to the next slide. This is just a breakdown of our numbers of ownership versus rental, just again, so you can kind of see more of a graphic view of this. The vast majority of our rentals, again, are long-term. Attached ownership is the larger percentage out of our ownership units, but between all the different segments, most of our units within our inventory are in the ownership category. So it's same information as the previous slide, but just in a different presentation. Any questions on that one? I'm a numbers person, so I love
Oh, so what, sorry, just percentages?
Yeah.
So
That's
is it
just
like, it's 55% our ownership, is that what we're? or is it
52.8.
52.8 for, oh, okay, I see there's a bar there, okay, 52.8. I was trying to add other things to it.
No
Okay,
worries.
Thank you.
All right, so our next breakdown is going to be ownership versus rental, and then this is category. And I do apologize for how small this is. Within this, what we're looking at is all of the colored bars you see are the ownership types: long-term rental, seasonal rental, attached ownership, detached, or that ownership rental category. And then kind of our left-hand column there is the breakdown of categories. So looking at the first section, we can see the majority of our category ones. There's 83 long-term rentals, and that's the highest number of category ones within that segment. Within category 2, we see our next highest categories are long-term rental and attached ownership at 206 and 192 respective. Category 3, we then start seeing where you'll see most of our category 1, 2s, and 3s are in rentals, and then where you'll see the most of our ownership are in those 3, 4, 5s and ROs. So that's just what this graph is showing you, that breakdown. Down at the bottom of this graph, just to give you some clarification on, when you see that LIHTC 40, 50, 60, city, county, category AB, those are specific category designations as it relates to those specific deed restrictions. LIHTC is low income housing tax credit, so that would be for us Aspen Country Inn and Truscott Phase 2. We have a handful of LIHTC 40, and that means 40% of HERA, I believe. Yeah, is that 40%? Which is what they're using for their income restrictions. Most of our new ones for ACI are going to be 50% of HERA, and I have the tables if you're curious what those numbers on our next slide. And then all of T2 is 60%. City and county, those are designations associated with those. Those are typically owned by the city or county, and those deed restrictions read in that the category or the rental rate associated is based on that employee's category when they're in the unit. So we don't know necessarily. Obviously, we still qualify them, and then we pass that information back, but we keep them listed as city or county because those categories fluctuate. And then the category AB, that is down for Basalt Vista for the housing project that happened. Those were specific categories associated with those, I think, 20 plus units down there. Any questions on that one? It's a lot of data.
No, it's very clearly put together though, thank you. Once
Yep.
you explained it, now it's
Yep.
like, okay.
No,
I
I
get
know,
it.
it's a lot to look at. I'm going to move on to the next one. We're
I'll
looking.
just comment, this is a snapshot of what the system is, not necessarily what exactly the community needs, right? Or the,
Sure.
Yes,
What's
this
existing.
is as it is
Yeah.
today. Thank
Yeah.
you. So this is a breakdown of categories and bedrooms. What you'll see along the left-hand side are all those categories we just looked at, but along the top are the actual bedroom size of the units. What I tried to highlight here are where we're seeing the most of our numbers here. So those highlighted squares are just saying where we're seeing those pockets. And so how you would read this for that first one that says 195, that means there are 195 one-bedroom Category 2 units. That's not telling us whether they're rental or ownership. It's a combination. This is just saying in our inventory, there are 195 one-bedroom Category 2s.
So that tells me we have one 6-bedroom unit under Category 5?
We do. Correct.
I will say, I think what's confusing about this a little bit is that we talk about having 3,100 units and the total is 3,100 bedrooms. How is this lining up?
So this is counting how many. This isn't counting how many bedrooms
Okay.
in that. This
Got
so this is saying in the 2-bedroom column there are 109 units that are Category 2. So that would actually be 218
Okay.
bedrooms within those 109 units.
It would help me to know how many bedrooms we have
Got it.
total too, at some point. Thank you.
He would love to come up with that number.
I know he would.
So we're giving you a task that we know you really want to do.
Like I said, I love numbers.
That's why we're giving you this task.
All right, I'm going to move on to the next one. This is going to be a similar, but now we're looking at ownership for and rental by bedroom size. So in this case, all of our colored bars are our bedrooms here, and then again, our left-hand column are the ownership type. So what we're looking at in that long-term rental one, we have 390 one-bedroom long-term rentals. We have 313 two-bedroom long-term rentals. Within the seasonal rental, majority of them are one-bedrooms with 124, and then we have 97 two-bedrooms in that seasonal rental. In our attached ownership, majority of them are in the 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms. In detached, it's mostly 2 and 3 bedrooms, but our 1 and 4 bedrooms in detached ownership are 72 and 74 respectively. We can go ahead and move on. I know we said we had a 2 o'clock stop. So what this slide is now looking at is, this is actually based off our 2021 biennial affidavit that we sent out to all of our owners in the program. And what this is looking at are underutilized ownership bedrooms. So this is kind of what Matthew had alluded to earlier. And what I highlighted here again are ones where the affidavit reported the number of occupants was less than the number of bedrooms of that specific unit. So in that first highlighted 133, that's telling me that there were 133 responses that there was 1 occupant living in a 2-bedroom. And then down below, what I did is I gave that total number of underutilized bedrooms, and this is the actual number of underutilized bedrooms based off that 2021 affidavit, 510. If we look at broken down by those underutilized bedrooms, we have 133 in 2 bedrooms that are underutilized. We have 246 in 3 bedrooms that are underutilized, and so on and so forth based on what's listed there.
So that one 6-bedroom unit is only using 4 bedrooms.
Correct. They have 4 occupants.
Right.
And some of this, there's a lot of different reasons contributing to this problem. It's a problem, right? Some of it is kids have gone to college and moved out, people have retired, units that when they were for sale didn't get enough people in the lottery to maximize the.
Got it.
Yep.
Deceased.
So rather than letting them sit empty for however many years to let them get filled, yes, people have gotten divorced,
Moved on.
partners have died, things like that. So there's a whole spectrum of reason that generates this type of churn that I think is important to know.
Patty?
Yeah, Steve, sorry, you're not on my screen, so it's hard for me. Thank you.
Yeah, I realize that. There are 3 different units, 2 in a 2-bedroom and 1 in a 3-bedroom that have 8 occupants in them. And thinking about our rule for the septic systems not being able to have more than 2 people per bedroom. Now, maybe these are in the city and the sewage system handles that, but I'm curious about those. Are these big families living in a substandard condition because they're packed in there so tight? Or what is the explanation for that?
I don't have the specifics of which of those, I'm looking at that same column now, that's those 3 specific units and their specific living situation and their specific unit. That it is a self-reported biennial affidavit. They listed that they had 8 occupants. And I don't believe our regulations state that there is a maximum per unit.
Like some communities do have. Their energy savings, Greg, so
Stay
pack
warm.
them in there.
But I'm happy to circle back on that one. Gonna move on, if that's
Yeah,
okay?
it's good for you, thanks.
So we're going to talk about applications within the system. So now we're just kind of getting into some additional data past here's about our inventory. So since the start of Q4, when I started doing these quarterly reports, we've approved and denied 1,156 applications within the system. That breakdown is listed as approved 1,016 and denied 140. And then I gave you the percentages. These are percentages of the application types we received within that 1,156. So the vast majority of the applications that come in are long-term rental when we look at this here.
And I just want to clarify, approved applications is there any connection with available units? Or these are just people who are applying in the system?
It depends. With sales ownership, you do not have to have an offered unit. When you are applying for a sales ownership application, you're just saying, I want to be able to enter in the lottery when a unit that I qualify comes up for bidding.
So it doesn't necessarily mean they're living there, it means they've can
Whereas on the rental side, we will not qualify them unless they've been offered a unit.
I see.
We're not going to process their application and charge them that application fee when there's no unit to go around. We don't know how long it could take for them to get into a unit. If it takes them 6 months, their circumstances could have changed and they might not meet that same category qualification of that
Sure.
unit now.
So this isn't going to illustrate the demand on the rental side?
No, unfortunately not. I do have one
That's
slide in
helpful.
here that will represent it as it relates to APTA managed units. Ones that are privately managed like Centennial or Castle Ridge that we don't offer the units for, we have no way of knowing their demand unless they were to communicate that back to us. What we really get on their end is, hey, I've been offered this unit at Centennial. I need to now see if I can qualify for it.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you.
Yep. Just talking in the
Ques-
denied.
Question on that?
Yeah, go ahead,
What is
Steve.
what is a tax credit rental?
So those are those low-income housing tax credit units at Aspen Country Inn and Truscott Phase 2.
Okay.
Do you need any additional context with that?
No,
Okay.
that's enough of a definition. I understand that.
I'm glad you do. I had to be explained several times what that was.
So I just wanted to take a moment and look at those 140 denied applications. Again, this is the breakdown out of those 140, where we're seeing most of those denials, and that is mostly in the long term and the tax credit. And then in that text below, it's listing some of the denial reasons that it could. They could be over income. They might not be able to prove full-time employment. They might be over the maximum occupancy limit. For rentals, we do have a maximum occupancy limit for our units based on how our leases are written. They might be under the minimum occupancy limit we never really focus too much on underutilized bedrooms with rentals because we will not qualify people unless they meet the minimum occupancy in that sense. So when we're talking underutilized bedrooms, that's with the lens of ownership. Rentals, we will not even go through the application if they don't have the minimum number.
And if I could just jump in there, the qualification staff of APSHA, they go far, far beyond the call of duty in trying to get people to qualify. It would be very easy to set a deadline and say you didn't get your packet in. Tough. That's not what we do. They really go very much the extra mile to help people help themselves to get their finances together, and you'd be a little shocked by how hard that can be to get people to help themselves. So we really do try very, very hard to get people to the point where we can adequately assess their financial situation, but that isn't always possible. Some people just don't get us the information, and then we can't make the decision. Sorry.
And that's another reason for being denied, is that you might not be able to show your asset verification or your income verification or your employment verification. You might not be able to provide that information for whatever reason.
Because you might be an artist and it's hard to prove those things.
And we have been working, especially with the self-employment side, on as much as we can. We know it's a very broad spectrum, but how can we assist in terms of these are the things that we'll be looking for, or these are the things that you can provide to us to help prove that you are working, the minimum requisite hours within Pickens County, and that 75% of your income is being earned here.
Can you illustrate that more? Like, what is an easier situation to deal with in that scope, and what is a more difficult situation to deal with in that
Self-employed can be very challenging. It really, at the self-employment realm, it's up to that person in terms of how they keep their
I was
records.
gonna say how they keep their books.
If they don't keep their books in a
We-
way that we can go through and figure out, are they working full-time? Do they have a client list? Are they able to show where the work was completed? Or, depending on their specific situation. Whereas a W-2 employee, pretty straightforward. Yet, my example, I work for the city, or that's where I get my pay stub through, so I can provide a W-2, my single W-2, along with a paycheck stub that shows, here's how many hours I worked.
So like a private attorney is billing hours, they would track
Right.
whether they're servicing clients in Pickens County.
Just this morning I was shown a case where it was a pile of handwritten notes stapled together. It was a self-employed individual providing a service, which I will preserve anonymity, and it was just a list of people's names and a time that they provided that service without a date, without a amount of money received, and so it's like, how we can't make a decision based on that, where it even happened. So it can be harder for people to do it, and we are hoping to reach back to them to give them ways to do it, but it's very difficult for us sometimes to provide, to analyze that information.
All right, based on the time, I'm gonna jump ahead. I'm gonna skip the slide. This is just talking about APTA managed units with regards to move-outs, move-ins, and maintenance requests. This, Kelly, kind of goes to your question on how do we know what the interest, and again, this is interest by what's available. It's not telling us how many people are coming into our office every single day saying, I need a category 2 2-bedroom for my family. This is just, hey, we've had these units listed and these are how many people have come onto our website to submit interest. How APTA managed units work compared to a private managed rental is our regulations are written in a way that we have to offer the unit to the person with the longest verified work history. And so that's why they submit interest, and then we go down the list from there. They still have to meet the qualifications of the unit. It's not just you worked here the longest, you get offered the unit. If it's a 2-bedroom and you're a single person, do you have another person to apply with, and then do you then meet the 2-person household incomes? This is where I was talking about the AMI, the 50% for Aspen Country Inn. We had just one unit since Q4 come up, and we had 115 people submit interest for it, and for a one person, they can't make over $38,700. This middle column, Litech 60, that's all of our T2. We had one studio, we had one bedroom, and we actually had 5 2-bedrooms. 2 bedrooms are the most challenging for us to fill for our T2 units because they're 60%, meaning a 2-person household can't make over $56,400, which basically rules out the majority of couples. And so a lot of the time it's maybe a single parent or one parent working, the other parent not working, and they have a dependent in the household. And then our category 1s and 2s, this is for category 1 was a Smuggler Mountain, and category 2 is Truscott Phase 1. Those are based off, category 1 is 50% AMI, so it's still these amounts, but for a studio, a single person, we usually can find someone who's making under that $38,700. And then with the category 2, that is based off 85%, and since it's a 2-bedroom, it'd be a 2-person household minimum, which would be $75,000, which again, a little easier to fill than that 60% in that sense. I'm gonna move on. So this last section I want to talk about, and sorry if I go through this a little quickly, is talking about bids and lotteries. So since Q4, We've had 27 listings posted, and that is 27 listings open for bidding, and we've had a total of 748 individual bids. This breakdown of the chart is showing where the majority of those bids happened. One thing to note here, Category 4 looks like there is a lot. There are, but we also had 14 Category 4 units up, so I would expect to see a high percentage there. Whereas that number in parentheses is telling you how many units. So we only had 1 Category 1. We had 4 Category 2s. I did some math here earlier today just to kind of figure out generally about how many we receive. For Category 2 to 4 bids, we typically receive 20 to 35 bids per unit that comes up. And then for the Category 1, 5, and ROs, so the super low, and then our upper as well, we typically only receive 8 to 15 bids. And that one of the things that Matthew had mentioned earlier as well is a regulation change that allows you to bid at your category plus 1. So if I'm a Category 1, I'm only allowed to bid on the 1 Category 1 unit plus the 4 Category 2 units. And then based on whatever your category is, it's that plus 1. And then on the right-hand side, that's just talking about, okay, let's look at it from the bedroom perspective. Are we seeing more interest in certain bedroom size? We had 12 2-bedrooms come up, and that was 45% of those 748 bids were on those 2 bedrooms, and then 37% were on the 7 1-bedrooms that came up. Again, one thing to always note here is, and I'm always careful with the data, especially as it relates to this is not based on demand. This is based on what is available. We don't say this number of Category 1's units are going to be available. We might go through an entire year where we do not have a single category come available of that specific one. So this is based off what was available during this time frame. Okay, next one is talking, same thing, bids, but now we're talking about what was the breakdown of the household size. The vast majority of our household size were 1 adults, no dependents. That was 42% of our 748 bids. The other one, it would be our, again, no dependents, 2 adults, no dependents, 37% of our bids. That's not saying that we don't have these households that want to start families. That's just their current living situation as they placed this bid.
Well, interesting.
And we do not have any restrictions on you can't place a bid based on your household size. It's just going to place you in a specific priority based on how our regulations are written. So for example, studios have a priority for single person households. Anyone who has more than a single person in their household bidding on a studio is a lower priority than any 1-person household.
Okay.
All right, last slide. So this is just talking about lotteries and sales. We talked about the bids. We had 25 lotteries run. The average winner's work history was 16 years out of those 25 lotteries. The left-hand column is saying that the winner was an owner, and then there's a further breakdown where they're a free market owner, an APCHA owner, or other deed restricted, meaning more than likely probably Town of Snowmass Village or even something down Valley. Right-hand side, the winner was a renter. You can see the vast majority here, 19 out of our 25 were renters. A good chunk of them were all free market renters. And then the lower portion, since Q4, 47 units have closed. The average sales price since Q1, sorry, that's when I started tracking this, since Q1, so the first half of this year was 519,000. One caveat to that, that did include 9 units that can sell at what the market will bear. So those numbers are thrown in here, but they're not based on an appreciation. All right, I'm at 1:59.
Okay, we have 1 minute for questions. I think most of the questions we asked through the presentation. Does the board have any specific questions, or do we have a countdown? We have 30
I just
seconds.
would like to probe the board if there's things you're hearing that you want clarification about.
Well, I don't think we can do that in 60 seconds,
Well, I
but
guess
you have
I'd
one
ask
big
the
one.
question they can answer at another time is just, given the new environment with Zoom and telecommuting, people working, the stories you hear about somebody who did live here and work here and qualify, then getting a job that pays a lot more, but they remain here but work for Goldman Sachs or Vail or ESPN elsewhere, I'm sure you're hearing all the same stuff we all hear, no doubt, through the community, but how is, this could be a problem, as we're seeing how this is changing the nature of everything from the way people rent in the free market, STRs, all that.
Because technically, you don't have to physically work here, you get your
Right.
paycheck here.
If you just get a paycheck here, are we going to need to tweak that?
I think that's something that the board will see in the next probably 6 months, is a conversation of what constitutes work in Pickens County. It's something that internally we've been wrestling with, as we've been seeing more and more of these self-employed individuals, and then others that we can't exactly figure out what they actually do within Pickens County. So it's something that's certainly Kelly's gonna have to grapple with the rest of the APSHA board at first, while we try to rewrite those regs to make sure that folks aren't working for Goldman, but working in Pickens County, if that's what the board chooses. I don't, it's gonna be.
Yeah.
But it's not correct that once you're in APSHA housing, you can work remotely for anyone. That is 100% not correct. The rules are still 1,500 hours in Pickens County, and it's how we interpret that. That's the hard part. But you've seen some of the people in the press have said, oh, you can work anywhere in the world. No, it's still.
You can work
50
remotely from here for anywhere in the world.
Right, but still, that doesn't cut it.
Your physical presence is here.
Right, but that doesn't cut it for the working.
Right.
And so we need to adjust it, but the regulations maybe to really reflect it, but it's.
Right. It seems that would make sense because the world has changed and everything has changed.
Well, so I mean, I guess I interpret, tell me if I'm wrong, but like you can work for Goldman Sachs, but you would have to service 75% of clients present in Pickens County.
Right.
And
You work
would
for
have
Goldman
to
Sachs.
demonstrate
in
that,
They have a
for
local
example,
presence.
right?
yes.
Yeah.
You can't do clients in Hong Kong or London doesn't cut it.
25% of your clients
Right.
could be in Hong Kong or London, but the rest would have to be, like, that's how I interpret like a lawyer or a CPA or a
Yeah.
caterer
75% of your
or,
income
you know.
has to come from Pickens County.
Right, okay. Yeah, that's a sticky wicket. I'm improving that.
And I think the conversation will come up, because, we gave bonuses to staff, and it includes goes into their income for, inflationary issues. And, we don't want those things to kick people out of their housing, because we're trying to keep their food on their table and their heaters on and the lights on at their homes during this inflationary period that we're in. So I think that needs to be something we need to talk about in the future.
We did adjust our rental rules to be 150%. So when you requalify, you can make 150% more than what the categories that you live in
We're
for a
appreciating the
year.
fact people are getting
this
raises
year,
to
and then
live
we'll
here. Okay,
revisit it.
I'm really glad to hear that.
We
I knew-
didn't like that either, that
Yeah,
we-
that's a
they
perverse
had to find
incentive, yeah.
someplace else to live.
Yeah, that's great. That's great to hear. Okay, you
Thank
did
you.
well. Only 3 minutes. You guys are great.
There's a lot of information there.
Thank you very much. And when you guys are leaving, I'm going to
appreciative.
bring it to the board quickly. We have 3 candidates we interviewed for public health, and I don't have their names directly in front of me.
I can help
Liz
you out
Stark.
here real quick, Patty. So there's one regular and at-large vacancy and one alternate at-large vacancy on the Board of Health. You've interviewed 3 candidates, Dara Eric, Liz Stark, and Barry Romberg for those positions. And so we were hoping to get some direction from the board, if possible, today on both the regular and alternate positions that we could include in a resolution for tomorrow.
Well, I did watch all of the interviews, the ones that I missed, and I am definitely going to put it right out there. I'm supporting Liz Stark for the permanent position. I think Liz, her background with emergency management, her background with community health, her background with healthcare in this valley, and all of her skills together would be a great addition to the Board of Health.
I'll agree
agree.
with that.
Okay, and then I'm not,
Who are they
agree with-
replacing?
I agree
Can you
with that, too.
remind? Can you remind?
Ann Mullins, no, Ann Mullins was the city's
She's
appointee.
the alternate. Oh my
Claudia?
gosh, I just totally.
Yeah, me
You
too.
guys are on the Board of Health.
I know, Greg's the chairman.
Claudia and.
Jeannie Siebold
right.
has
Jeannie.
left for a
Thank
year.
you.
That's
And
right.
Ann Mullins is gone. So I think that, I
But
really
Ann's the
like.
city's appointment,
I
wasn't
liked-
she?
She was the city, but she was no longer, she's an alternate because she wasn't the city
Right,
council
right.
any longer. Is
But
that
I don't
right?
think we're appointing Ann's position. There was another alternate
She's the
that's,
city alternate? So
There-
Jeannie Siebold and,
There's and one at-large alternate also.
right, and I'm sorry, I apologize, I'm blanking the name.
So I'll leave that appointment up to, I know both of the other candidates were great.
I'd put forth Barry for the alternate. And I have to say, I was impressed by everyone, but I think Liz and Barry have more of a presence in the community, been here longer, doing the work and involved with both public health and Board of Health and getting us through COVID. So I think I would put them in first, but then I really liked what I heard from Derry and would somehow love to keep her involved and engaged for when the next opening comes. I'd love to be able to consider her next time when there's another opening. I wanted to see what everyone else thought.
Is the board good with that selection?
I just was a little, I couldn't tell if Barry was traveling a lot. I mean, you guys don't meet that frequently anymore.
Well, she lives here, but she does travel, but she's resident of,
Right.
She'd be the
sure.
alternate that can
Yeah.
Zoom, probably.
Okay.
Are we good with
and we're
Liz
meeting
and?
quarterly, yeah.
So Francie dropped off?
So I was impressed with Barry's work on the COVID response in the public schools. She just got right out there and got involved in that, and I was really impressed by that. And also, I looked at all the videos again, and I liked her response. She had a 20-year gap in her nursing career. Well, she was being a full-time mother during those 20 years, and you can't knock somebody for that.
You bet you can't knock somebody for that.
Yeah, so I am really intrigued by Dara because she has such an unusual background that I hope that somehow we could plug her in at some point just to get the benefit of her international experience in a wide variety of situations. But when I was trying to decide between the two, I was like 50-50. I could go either way. So I could agree with Greg to go with Barry Ramberg for
Okay,
the
is
alternate
the rest of the
position.
board good with that, with Liz and Barry?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm seeing 3 of us, 4 of us. Rancy?
Well, I like the woman whose name I forget that Steve was just talking about. But I don't know, I'm not as familiar with Barry as you guys are, so I'll go with your decision.
Okay, great. So John, would you give direction to Charlotte? Because we'll have that come forward on our consent agenda for tomorrow.
Is
All
that
right.
it? Is there more? Is that
Nope, that's it. And the other one was John
Ward.
Ward. I was going to say Walker, I was close. We're reappointing him to the Housing Board at this time. And then we have to set up some joint issue with the city for the next appointment. It's a joint position. Okay, so I think we're good on that, right, John P? All right, so
Let me double
we're,
check something really quick, because I want to make sure we haven't had a miscommunication with the city on,
Charlotte said she's working with the city to set up a time frame to do the interview.
for the alternate?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
All right, so Grassroots, thank you very much. We will be back here tomorrow at noon, and we are headed to Redstone. And I do
Are we
believe.
going to the church?